So let's get into this this therapy article here. So 61% of Hinge users say they value emotional vulnerability over all these other things. Even though Joanna mentions therapy in all of her dating profiles, why? She rarely saw guys call it out on theirs until recently. Now she says she sees more men make mention of the practice, and it's not uncommon to see shout-outs like, quote, "My simple pleasures include 70s rock, strong coffee, and therapy," end quote, or, quote, "My therapist would say I'm ready for a real relationship," end quote. And Joanna says it's an immediate swipe right. She's 32 and she lives in California, of course. And Joanna's not alone. According to a new study, 61% of daters on the app rank emotional vulnerability over all these other things. Per the data, it's more important than attractiveness, income, or height. In a similar vein, 65% of Hinge daters say it's attractive when someone talks about their feelings on a first date. 84% think it's a green flag when people open up about their values, and 63% like when a potential partner opens up about their relationship hopes and fears on a first date. The point? Men who go to therapy and are open about their deep, dark feels are extremely, devastatingly hot. Okay, let's get into this.
Does that ring true for you, Amala?
It depends. It's totally dependent on what you mean by therapy. And this is where we get into just people having different perceptions of what therapy means. In LA, there's an interesting perception of what therapy means. And, you know, we went to our community post and I asked you guys, do you go to therapy? And we got tons of responses, 183,000 responses, 2,424 comments. So a lot of you had a lot to say. There were combat vets talking about how they've been to therapy, people who've been in therapy for several years, who had emotional problems, a therapist here who goes to therapy herself and swears by it's not maybe it's necessity, but it's help. People who have been to marriage counseling and it's helped them, or have been in abusive relationships. And there's such a spectrum of what therapy means. There's so many different therapists that you can go to. And I guess mine would just depend on where you're going and what is the focus of the therapy. Because with all these helpful stories, which I'm reading and I'm like, oh yeah, totally. In LA who are like, their personality is going to therapy.
Yeah.
And they meet for brunch on Sunday, and it's just them all sitting together and talking about what their therapist said this week. And it almost becomes a necessity to be in therapy, to have the personality trait of being in therapy.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And then you're at brunch with your friends talking about your therapist, so there's like the social, like, oh, this is just a normal, cool thing, and if I want to be cool, I got to be in therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, in LA, it's like, what's your sign? What's your fur baby's name? And what's your therapist's name?
Therapists maybe not wanting you to get better because they make money off of you coming in to see them. It's very much the problem that we're seeing in Western medicine now and with pharmaceutical companies, is that they don't care about you getting better as a person. And obviously this comes down to choice and finding the right therapist and finding the one who actually does want to get you out of their office. But there's so many doctors, pharmaceutical companies, Western medicine practices that will see you and go, oh, you know, we'll come back again, and we have to fix this, and we have to fix this. And you're like, oh, but I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. And then they go, oh, you're feeling good, but as soon as you leave therapy, it's when you're going to start to feel bad again. I can see where in some cases that would be true, and it requires nuance, but in others, I'm like, okay, when's the tie cut, girl? You've been going to therapy for 4 years.
There are good and bad, like chiropractors. And, you know, sometimes you'll go to a chiropractor and be like, hey, my back's tweaked. Can you pop it back into place? And they'll be like, I'll do one little pop, but then you got to come back the next week and we'll do a little bit extra. And it's like, well, could you like show me some exercise? And like, oh, I'll show you one, but then next week I'll show you a couple more. And it becomes this like long, unnecessarily strung out thing.
It's like, no, you need me.
Yeah.
You need me.
Yeah.
Don't go anywhere.
Yeah. And so there's on the therapist's side, there's that. And then there's also just the general, like, I think there's this weird undercurrent in our culture right now that is trying to normalize being dependent on therapy just to like get through life week in and week out. Yeah. And generally speaking, for most people, I think therapy is a healthy thing. Especially if you have trauma or something to work through, or emotional issues or anger issues or whatever it may be, it is a great tool that you can use. And I recommend, I've done it, to get back to, if you're like below zero, then get back to zero and get on your feet and go back out there and live life. You don't need it all the time. Now, are there other special situations if you have specific traumas or mental health issues or whatever where you may need it on an ongoing basis? Sure. But for back to where you're back on your feet and able to go out and go through life and live normally. And it's okay to say, like, you shouldn't be a normal person, an average person should not be dependent on this, and it shouldn't be part of your personality to have a therapist.
Right. It's like when we get into like, oh, I've been diagnosed with BPD, or I'm bipolar, or I'm a combat vet, or I have PTSD, or I've been abused, and all these things. I'm like, oh yeah, totally go to therapy. And even so, I think a lot of people could benefit from just having conversations about coping mechanisms, not used to being talked about in schools, not used to having conversations with our family about. There's a lot of people out there that just struggle with basic communication, basic coping with stress and anxiety, as we're seeing like this crazy uptick in anxiety now. But I'm like, what are actionable things that are actually going to help you out of this? Not like going to somebody to talk to them for an hour every week. Like, I know girls who are like, my boyfriend cheated on me, now I'm going to go to therapy. Be for real. Be fucking for real. You do not need it. It's like, you know, like the Sims games. Therapy is like an accessory. Like, oh, my Sim goes to therapy from 3 to 4 every Thursday. It's literally that. And you're almost seeing at least